So kind of going back to the idea of HRI, what do you consider, in your opinion, what makes a good robot that interacts with a human?
I think that one of the key things is don't over specialize, don't over adorn, don't make your robot really promise more than it's going to be able to deliver, because I think we still have very, very rudimentary abilities to behave appropriately in context. And as long as you can't really rely on a robot to know enough about a situation to have anything approaching a human level of response, then creating something that gives us the expectation is going to, it's going to turn around and bite us, because people will be disappointed in that robot. And we're at a weird point right now where there are a lot of claims. It's probably easier to sell a robot if you make a lot of promises about what it can do. And people love the idea of robots that they can have some sort of relationship in a very broad sense, companionship, it's cute, something like that. But it makes it easier to sell the robot, but we haven't really had enough robots out there for people to start to see how well they remain engaged. And I think most good robotics companies are actually less concerned with selling the robot and more concerned with building something that is going to keep engagement once it has been sold, once it's in someone's house. How do you keep people interacting with it?
Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting idea talking about the engagement level of a robot. Do you feel that there's certain types of robots that warrant a higher level of engagement and like a stronger bond between people? So for instance, government contractors, so I used to work in ground control stations for UAVs and things like that, but I read an article that one of the soldiers had a UAV that he flew on a bunch of different missions in Afghanistan or Iraq, and it was, I think, 15 missions or something like that, and it got shot down finally. And when it got shot down, the soldier demanded a burial for his UAV. And they were like, well, it's just a robot. And he's like, this thing has saved my life so many times, with all of the landmines, IDEs, and everything else out there. He's like, I want this thing buried. I want to have a proper send-off for it. Do you think you're going to see that kind of reaction from more people kind of going forward in the future with like social robots or home robots? Or do you think it's just going to be kind of one of those that's kind of a cool thing? I interact with it a little bit, but then after a while, like kind of like this new and shininess of it kind of wears off, and we actually go back to treating it more like a machine.
I think it really depends on the depth of the interaction. And you've talked about what's really an extreme use case. It's been engaged in life and death situations, so you will have a very strong bond. If it's vacuuming your floors, you won't. And one of the points that has been raised that I think was very interesting was to suggest that up until this moment in time, humans really had only a couple of ontological states that we could comprehend. One was alive and one was dead or inanimate. So you were either an object or you were an organism. And it's saying, so do we then get into a kind of schizoid state of having things that behave or that we treat like organisms that then behave like objects? And do we then treat them like objects, or do we carry over that more emotional response? And what does that mean in terms of us developing perhaps empathy? Is one of the biggest worries that people have. If we're engaging with something that looks like it's alive, but we can treat it badly, is this going to create a lack of empathy in us? One of the interesting hypotheses is that we're going to evolve towards a third ontological awareness, that there are some things that are both alive and not alive, that they can be emotionally engaging, but they can be turned off and on at will without damage. So if we can really develop that third ontological awareness, then perhaps there's not an issue with us being trained into a lack of empathy, because we'll understand that it's a that thing as opposed to an it or a you.